Welcome to the Geography of Crime, a podcast by Cap Index hosted by Dr. Grant Drawve, Vice President of Geospatial Crime Solutions. Crime doesn't happen in a vacuum. Place matters, and in each episode of this podcast, we'll explore how geography shapes crime risk across industries. With expert insights from criminologists, security professionals, and business leaders, we'll break down crime trends, analyze real-world data, and explore what drives risk in different places. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Good day, everyone. I'm your host, Grant Drawve, and you're listening to the Geography of Crime podcast. And today I have the distinguished guest of Dr. Eric Piza from Northeastern University. With that, I'm going to kick it to him because he has more titles than I can memorize to even get into. So, Eric, please take some time and introduce yourself.
Certainly. So first off, Grant, thank you for having me. Been looking forward to this. This is going to be a lot of fun. So I am the Lippman Family Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Northeastern University. I also co-direct the Crime Prevention Lab, which is one of the research labs within the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice Center on Crime, Race, and Justice. And I'm the Director of Crime Analysis Initiatives, which essentially entails me developing the crime analysis curriculum for the university.
Very nice. And going back, we've known each other, 10, 15 years, kind of stemming from the Rutgers days or kind of the lineage of that. With your history, though, and kind of give everyone the 30,000 foot view of how did you get to where you are today? What got you interested in crime analysis, criminal justice as a whole?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm doing this for a living largely by mistake, right? So I fell into this profession very much by happenstance. I didn't grow up wanting to be a professor, right? I grew up planning on playing shortstop for the New York Mets. That obviously didn't work out. But I always knew I was interested in criminal justice. Now, coming from a non-academic family, as a first-generation college student, I thought that meant I only had two career paths. I thought being interested in criminal justice meant you could become a police officer or a lawyer.
That's the truth.
I always knew I didn't have the upper body strength to do enough push-ups to get through the police academy, so I ruled out becoming a cop pretty quickly. So as a college student, I thought that pre-law and going to law school and becoming an attorney was my criminal justice path. Until one day, I saw a flyer during my undergraduate days at Rutgers University in the great city of Newark, New Jersey. It was a flyer looking for student research assistants at a research center called the Police Institute, which was run at the time by Professor George Kelling of Broken Windows, either fame or infamy, depending on what side of the debate you come down on. And I applied for it. Long story short, I got it. And that kind of introduced me to this whole new world of data-driven public safety. It introduced me to partnerships between researchers and practitioners in the field. And it really exposed me to this whole arena that, again, I didn't know existed. I didn't know research was something you could create a career on. I didn't know criminal justice can glean so many benefits from analysis. So that's essentially what led me down my path. From there, I worked at the Newark, New Jersey Police Department as the GIS specialist for 7 years. I was finishing up my PhD during that same time. And after I finished that up, and after I finished my PhD, I did a short postdoc at Rutgers University at the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice. I then went on to become a professor at John Jay College in Manhattan. I did that for 9 years before coming to Northeastern University in Boston 3 years ago.
Very nice. I mean, that's quite a career path. And I still find it funny even after post-PhD, when my dad said, so you're going to be a cop, you're going to be a lawyer. So it still comes down to when you say you do criminal justice, there's a lot of understanding of you're either going to be a cop or lawyer, not much in between. So I still get a chuckle out of that when other people get the same impression. So,
or maybe you could be a lawyer who fights crime on the weekends or something and do both.
Yeah, a very Marvel-esque character. I like it and get on board with that. Now, you've done a lot of work with evidence-based policing, and you kind of hit a big part there, the data-driven side of it, being exposed to data. How would you describe evidence-based policing to the general public, people who aren't aware of that area?
That's a really good question, especially since there's so many written definitions of evidence-based policing in the criminology literature. I prefer the definition that was offered by Gary Cordner, which essentially he said evidence-based policing amounts to using data, analysis, and research to complement experience and professional judgment in order to provide the best possible police service to the public. I like that definition because it goes out of its way to use the word experience and professional judgment, and also it connects the research to that via the word complement. So the way I like to explain evidence-based policing to the public, or even to police professionals who may be new to the concept of using research in practice, is that it is by no means a replacement for professional experience of practitioners. It's a way to incorporate data analysis, research, statistics, all of that kind of stuff to supplement that type of experience. And hopefully by combining the two, we could develop smarter programs and practices for public safety.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's not one replacing almost the instinct and experience of people within the police force or that line of business with just data. There is a nice complement and balance to that. And given your work with a lot of law enforcement agencies, what are some of those barriers when you think about trying to implement, be it even data-driven or evidence-based practices within a law enforcement agency? What are some of those barriers that usually show up pretty quickly take a bit of time? So at the end of the day, change can be tough, and police departments can be a bit resistant at times to that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, so there's kind of cultural barriers and more practical barriers. Some of the practical barriers that I've experienced in working with police departments around the country is a lot of times data systems in police departments are not set up for research. I think we take for granted, or rather, I think we've wrongly assumed that all police departments are kind of in the same space when it comes to data and technology, given that we're supposedly at least living in the evidence-based / problem-oriented era of policing. We think that all police agencies actually have the internal capacity to collect and analyze data to support those efforts. And that's just not the truth. So one very practical barrier is a lot of times data systems, again, are just not set up to support this type of activity. I won't name names. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but one police department I worked with recently, their RMS system did not have the capacity to export data with the location information included. So in other words, they could give you a nice spreadsheet of all of the robberies in the city, and where the robbery occurred, just for whatever reason, cannot be put into the exported table. They bought that RMS system like a year or two prior to our project. So it was a modern RMS system that didn't have that capacity. You can't do much spatial analysis without plotting the location of the incidents. So there's like kind of technological or like day-to-day practical barriers. The cultural barriers, one that academics speak a lot about and that you alluded to, was officer skepticism. Mm-hmm. This is new for a lot of police agencies, and introducing the concept of evidence-based policing and explaining that research can play an important role oftentimes falls on, if not deaf ears, falls on very skeptical ears. So that's something that has to be navigated. Now, to be perfectly frank, I acknowledge that's a challenge. I think it's a challenge more than a problem because, to be perfectly honest, officers deserve the right to be skeptical of evidence-based policing. They deserve the right of being skeptical to outside academics coming and playing a role in day-to-day policing, because these officers have spent careers doing their job a particular way. I'm sure, in a lot of cases, they've been rather effective at a lot of the public safety challenges that they've had to tackle. So it would be naive of academics to expect for them to approach this type of work with zero skepticism, with no skepticism at all. So a healthy dose of skepticism, I don't think necessarily is a deal breaker, which brings me to the second cultural barrier to evidence-based policing, and that has to do with outside academics sometimes being unable to navigate that skepticism in a productive way. We're trained in a lot in academia, right? We're trained how to do good research. We're trained in how to write well. We're trained in statistics and research methodology. A lot of the things we have to do, however, on a regular basis, we receive no formal training in. We aren't really trained in effective project management. We aren't trained in how to effectively supervise a research team. We aren't trained in most programs to do public speaking effectively. We're not trained in relationship building. And to be perfectly frank, it shows a lot of times, right? So another cultural barrier is outside academics not understanding how they have to kind of switch up their role a little bit, at least at the outset of projects, in a way that actually effectively converts skeptical officers to supportive officers.
No, it's interesting there. 'Cause, like, how you ended that made me almost think of an academic, almost code switching in a sense of it is a very, you're no longer in the ivory tower in the sense of that. So how you approach it is very different. And a comment and then a follow-up question. When you brought up RMS, like it just rings true of even in the post NIBRS era, we request data from agencies all over the US. So many agencies cannot pull their own crime incident data themselves, even like let alone they can pull it and give you lat long. But the ability to use data from a vendor and export it, use it themselves, like it's mind-boggling that you have jurisdictions and cities and governments paying for a software that they then can't use their own data or extract it easily. Like it blows my mind like that is still ongoing. And then a follow-up question too, as you kind of described the culture when it comes to this evidence-based practice within policing. Do you think that's also why, if you look at who we've cited over the years and decades, why certain scholars have kind of gravitated to be almost a city-specific person? Like they develop those ties within a police department and they've worked for them 5, 10, 15, 20 years because they have broken down some of those barriers. Do you see that kind of a product of almost overcoming some of those barriers of the past?
I think so. But another way to think of overcoming barriers is relationship building.
Yeah.
Again, it would be naive for academics to expect a 100% warm welcome at a police agency that they're just starting to work with. It takes time and it takes relationship building to develop the level of trust that is necessary to allow police practitioner partnerships to really excel. So again, I think spending time to develop those relationships, I almost consider that part of the actual research process itself.
Yeah, fully.
Because without doing that, without developing the relationships, a lot of times these types of partnerships really don't stand much of a chance of succeeding.
And I want to underscore how important and how time intensive that can be at times. Like it's a dedicated effort. So I mean, fully support that. Now, given your work and your research on more crime controlling technology, be it CCTV, gun acoustics, and just broader other technology solutions, how do you see technology playing a role in crime prevention nowadays? Because you are becoming and are an expert in a lot of different softwares and technologies. What's the role?
Yeah, certainly. So my research on technology's role in crime prevention just kind of confirms my beliefs that technology should not be seen as an easy button, right? So it's not like you press the big red technology button and the cities you work in are safer. Which, like, as human beings, I think we tend to have that expectation of technology far too often. When working on my dissertation back in the day, one of the favorite phrases I encountered in the academic literature was technological determinism, which is essentially a term given to the expectations humans have for the power of technology, right? We just think that adopting technology is by definition going to make things easier. No exception in public safety, right? I think police departments a lot of times turn to technology and they don't understand that whether or not the technology is going to deliver on its promise depends on a whole host of non-technological factors. So my research shows that pretty much when technology is used in a manner that supports effective policing, that's when it works. We know from 5, probably close to 6 decades of policing research now that policing is most effective when it is proactive instead of reactive. Policing is most effective when it addresses underlying problems leading to crime incidents rather than just focus on the rapid response to those crime incidents. When technology is used in a manner that can help police further those goals, that's when it works the best. When technology is used to support reactive policing that is incident driven, I guess we shouldn't be surprised. That's when technology leaves a little bit to be desired.
No, that's truly like brings to light then when you think about implementation within some of these police departments and you want to think through what is success. So be it say CCTV or gun shot spotter, gun acoustics, whatever it is. How important is it when they think through the implementation of any type of technology of measuring what is success? So at the end of the day, is it being effective at what we want to do? How are those conversations?
That's a terrific question. And I think the how do we define success question is incredibly critical. Mm-hmm. Because what I see when it comes to technology, people tend to confuse outputs with outcomes. Right. And output are the activities around any given intervention. So the number of calls for service a police officer responds to, for example, that's an output. Mm-hmm. The number of citations and arrests made, that's an output. An outcome are the actual goals that we want to achieve. We want to reduce crime. We want to reduce fear of crime. We want to improve police-community relations. Whatever it is, that's the outcome. So one challenge when looking at how technology is integrated into policing is just communicating that and communicating and getting people to realize that increasing outputs is not necessarily the same as improving outcomes.
Very nice. And as we think about that, I think it's important to bring, I mean, in essence, you are a pracademic. You've had experience within law enforcement side and now on the academic side. So when you think about the key differences with how academic, your researchers, and then police departments think about crime prevention, where are some of those breaks in terms of thinking about what are those differences?
Given the nature of our jobs as academics, we have the privilege of being super focused on individual outcomes. So when we're working on a crime prevention project, for example, we're focused on the question of, did that intervention generate desirable outcomes? And in this example, did it actually reduce crime? Practitioners don't have that luxury because their outcomes are, well, first of all, plentiful, right? There's lots of things that are expected of police that are outside the realm of individual interventions. A lot of times they could be competing. So for example, I just said before that research really suggests that responding quickly to incidents does not have the crime prevention effect that we would expect. So from the academic perspective, if police are preventing crime, we may be of the opinion that it doesn't matter if it comes at the expense of responding to calls a little bit later. Police are held, partially held to a standard of their community's wants and desires. And if communities value a quick response time when they pick up the phone and call police, then the police don't have the luxury of focusing purely on crime prevention in that situation. Police priorities are also not just competing, but rapidly changing. Preventing robbery may be a specific goal 1 month, and based on seasonality or maybe a byproduct of their own success, a completely different crime problem may need to be prioritized the next month. So I think that's the main difference when looking at crime prevention and reduction through the two lenses. Again, academics, we get to look at this on a project by project and outcome by outcome basis. Practitioners have a whole host of competing interests that they're held responsible for.
And I think that really holds value of it's the day-to-day for them versus the new shiny object from a project to project and trying to track that outcome. Now, you spoke to this early on. You've worked quite a bit with practitioners, not always law enforcement, but beyond that, just broader practitioners in the field of public safety. In your eyes, how do you develop that successful academic practitioner partnership? And you've spoke to it, but what are some of those key features that you try to build in?
Yeah, a partnership by definition involves everyone, and a partnership should therefore be mutually beneficial for everyone. So I think the first thing that academics need to do when trying to develop these types of partnerships is understand well enough to clearly communicate to your police partner exactly why engaging in this research project is a good idea for them and why it will provide tangible benefits to them. And spoiler alert, advancing the academic literature is not necessarily a benefit for your partner police agency, right? So academics, right, generating new research, new evidence, finding new interesting scientific discoveries, that's what's important to us. Not to say that that's not important for your police partners, but the police partners have much more tangible needs that they have to address immediately. So identifying and explaining how your research helps them achieve those goals, I think that's really important for successful academic practitioner partnerships, because that helps keep answering that question, helps make sure that the partnership is indeed mutually beneficial.
No, I think you hit it there at the end with the mutual beneficial. It just can't be one-sided if you want that partnership to work through. Now let's come back to your roots. So you have a textbook out with Jonas out of KCPD, with Esri on crime analysis. How important is it for police departments? And you even had a survey through IAC, and you've published on it, with the integration of crime analysts within law enforcement work itself. But within that, using them as a tool for research methods and analysis, how important is that into the day-to-day work of law enforcement agencies?
So crime analysis has gotten to the point where it's, to be frank, a requirement of effective policing. If we take a look at all of the interventions and program types that research indicates are highly successful at improving public safety, hotspots policing, focused deterrence, problem-oriented policing, so on, all of them require the ability to rigorously analyze problems so that they could actually be targeted by police practices. That's what crime analysts do. Crime analysts are the only people within a police agency that have a full-time job revolving around the analysis of data. So they've gotten to the point where, again, they are critical to the police mission. One thing that I've seen in my research, and you alluded to this in the survey of the International Association of Crime Analysts membership that I conducted several years ago, is that despite the central role that crime analysts have played in modern policing, a lot of times ensuring that they have training in cutting edge spatial analysis and research methodology oftentimes falls by the wayside, which is unfortunate because, again, crime analysis maybe a couple of decades ago could be seen as a luxury that didn't require constant resources or constant investment. It's no longer the case today. We can't be effective in policing without the important work of crime analysts. So I think that the training and development of crime analysts should be at the forefront of policing, and police departments shouldn't kind of let the development of their crime analysis units fall by the wayside.
You know, and I think that's an important part there at the end. And I've worked with some agencies where they're having trouble hiring to meet their police officer numbers, but they also don't want to take a line and move it over to hire a crime analyst. So a lot of medium to larger sized cities, not all of them have crime analysts still. It's a bit of a luxury. And it is at that day and age of you have the data, you have the resources. It's the justification. Some people just don't want to pull the trigger on that, even though we see the rise in real-time crime centers, fusion centers, all of that. But within agency or even a shared resource becomes super valuable to everything you just spoke to there. So it's kind of echo chamber here, but I think we all support continuing education, but also crime analysts widely seen. And it's the day and age of it should be more present. And I guess with that, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, I really appreciated your comment about even sharing resources if agencies don't have the internal capacity to hire crime analysts on their own, right? Even teaming up to build some type of cross-jurisdictional crime analysis unit. or leveraging county and state level governments to facilitate crime analysis, which is what they do in New York State. So the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services takes it upon themselves to support crime analysis throughout the state. They fund a number of crime analysis centers throughout the state of New York, so up in the Albany area, all the way down southeast in different parts of Long Island. So that's a model, again, that could show how maybe higher levels of government can do a lot to help support and develop crime analysis at the local level.
Oh, fully. And especially when you think about, at the end of the day, offenders and people aren't stopping at city or jurisdictional boundaries. So a arbitrary subjective line is not changing them from committing a crime in another area or another site. So if you do have that regional resource, it becomes more valuable. And it's just working towards that. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's slowly getting better.
Yeah, it's and slowly getting better. Another word for that is progress. So it's okay. As long as we're making progress.
Baby steps. But I mean, let's bring it up full circle. Because I mean, given your roles at Northeastern, what's on the horizon, be it for you, crime analysis in general, the crime prevention lab, the Center on Crime, Race, and Justice? What are you looking forward to? What are you getting started?
So as for myself, so I'm currently managing 6 grant-funded projects that support partnerships throughout the country. So my primary goal is to not pass out while
I don't know how you manage that. Yeah,
by holding by a thread, but while not managing that many projects. No, but all joking aside, so for the next couple of years, most of the research products that come out of the crime analysis lab are going to focus on these 6 partnerships that I have with agencies around the country. So we're really excited about that. We have some very talented PhD students at Northeastern University who are working on these projects through the crime prevention lab. So I'm really excited to see the type of studies that we're able to develop from these projects, this type of student dissertations that maybe emerge from these projects, and again, hopefully the strengthening of partnerships and conducting research in a manner that actually helps these agencies improve public safety. So that's going to be kind of the primary efforts from the lab over the next couple of years. This summer, we'll also be welcoming our first non-tenure track professor to the lab. So we're hiring a research professor at the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice who will be assigned to the crime prevention lab. So the hope there is that we will, with this new professor working with us, we'll be able to both build upon the existing partnerships we have, but also develop some new partnerships to help support new research projects. The School of Criminology and Criminal Justice at Northeastern University, one cool initiative I think we're doing that I suggest everyone check out is we have a hosted collection on crimarchive.com. It's spelled very funky, so maybe in the show notes we could put a link to it.
We can link to that.
So essentially, what most people aren't aware of is that every single research article can be turned open access free of charge. So what we're doing at the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice is every time one of our faculty members or students publishes something within a journal, even if that journal is subscription access only, we have a free version of that publication up on our hosted collection. We're a founding member, or we're a member of the Crim Archive Consortium, which essentially means that we are just pledging our commitment to open science and making sure that our research is publicly available to anyone who would want to read it. Because I've always found it a little hypocritical that some academics, myself included, make a living talking about and writing about how practitioners need to be driven by science. And at the same time, the vast majority of science is only available behind a paywall. So we're trying to do our part to make sure that all of our research is freely accessible to anyone who may be interested in checking it out.
Oh, that's stellar. And it is, I mean, the Crim Archive, I'll be the first one to admit I wish I did more on it than I should, but I also don't publish as much as I used to. But it is a great open access resource itself too. So I'm glad that you all have that as a school itself too. So yes, we'll definitely link to that.
Yeah, and also too, Grant, I mean, be nice to yourself, right? So So you say you wish that you did more on it. So do I. I think anyone does. Like I had no idea how copyright permissions around publications went. I thought that the options were to publish your research in academic journals that were closed off to the public or spend thousands of dollars to make that article open access. I didn't know that there was a third option that allowed you to actually make work publicly available free of charge. So now that we know that, right, I think it's important that we embrace that model of publishing.
Oh, fully. And I think you hit it well there it's a bit hypocritical if you want to speak on the advancement of science in these different fields, but then the people in the field can't openly access it behind it's gatekeeping with a paywall and that to it. And I mean, more broadly, a lot of and you're seeing a change in some of our journals nowadays, but the writing structure is more geared towards fellow academics versus your practitioner in the field, depending on the journal. But it is some of that of different outlets have different resources and write-ups to it, but at least that's one way to access what's going on.
Yeah, certainly. And again, that's something that we're just not trained in, right? I mean, in graduate school, I was told to do good research and publish in good places on a regular basis. I wasn't taught open science, right? So
not at all.
Yeah, these are all things that I had to learn on my own throughout my career.
All right. Last but not least, what grinds your gears when it comes to data, criminal justice research? What do you wish more people understood?
I'm going to be a little redundant here, right? Because my answers are obviously influenced by my recent experiences, and I've had some annoying recent experiences. So what's been grinding my gears lately is how bad academics can be in holding up their end of the bargain in applied partnerships with police, right? Despite, again, all of the ink that's been spilled talking about the challenges that police culture can present to applied research partnerships. On the academic side, we do plenty of things ourselves to really mess things up from the beginning. And what's frustrating about it is a lot of it is like unforced errors. Partnerships with police agencies are like any other relationship, right? No one likes to be lectured, right? No one likes being spoken at instead of conversed with. No one likes language that could be interpreted as condescending, regardless of what the actual, goals of the language were. No one likes being in a conversation and not having the opportunity to ask questions or provide their own opinions and perspective. These are normal people skills. And I hate to say that these normal people skills far too often don't seem to translate into academia, at least not when academics are tasked with developing partnerships and engaging with police agencies in a mutually beneficial way. So that's what's been grinding my gears lately, is that academics far too often fall short in the relationship development part of research practitioner partnerships.
And it echoes what you've talked about in this. That is pivotal for anything, the advancement of science. Anything that you want to get into is going to involve working with practitioners. And it's a small enough field, realistically, of word gets around and that to where you're not isolated, but it becomes more difficult to partner with more practitioners if you're having issues. And at the end of the day, we need them at the table. And if you're casting them aside or belittling them, you're kind of stuck there on an isolated island trying to do your work.
Yeah, exactly. And the word partnerships, right, that can have different meanings as well. If you want to develop longstanding partnerships that lead to multiple research collaborations, that requires the first partnership to go well. And when I say go well, I don't mean produce good findings, right? I mean, if research findings suggest that interventions did not have the desired results, then that's just what the research says. There's no getting around that. But there's a way to communicate that information in a way that's still helpful for the police agency, that is still respectful of the time that the police agency dedicated to working with you. And I just wish academics, perhaps, again, this is something we should actually train in graduate school. But however we get there, that's something that I wish academics did a little bit better of a job at.
No, and It does bring to light of what we were trained on in doc programs versus the reality of some of this work of some restructuring. I mean, there's many things I wish I knew until it was too late, and you're neck deep in trying to sort it out. But it's the learning curve of it all, I guess.
Yeah, there's a learning curve, right? But
Yeah.
but again, like some of it is just like basic human being stuff, right?
Fully. Mhm.
So if someone was at let's say so the NFL draft is coming up, so I've been thinking about how terrible my favorite team, the New York Giants, are going to be. But so I've been thinking about football a lot. So if someone's at a bar watching a football game, for example, and someone approached them to have a conversation about the football game, no one would enjoy, again, just having to sit back and listen to this person's opinions about football, this person's experience watching football, this person's perspective on which teams are good and bad. Like no one would enjoy having that conversation being spoken at instead of with, being spoken to condescendingly, and never having the opportunity to give your own opinion on the football game. No one would appreciate being in that football conversation. Research is the same thing, right? We can't talk at cops. We can't act like we have all of the answers. We can't not afford police officers the opportunity to ask critical questions of the work we're doing. Normal human being stuff, right? But for some reason, a lot of academics fall short on that.
And I think you hit it well there too. Of we don't know everything, so the ability to say "I don't know" goes a long way. And it's almost that humbleness of when I've worked with agencies, it is that you're in an ivory tower, you're in academia, you're not as used to it as us. So it takes a while to develop that partnership, that relationship. And it is like, it cannot truly be one-sided. And I think you're fully correct. If you're talking at them and not hearing their input or asking their experience in it all, it's not going to go far. And it's going to be more of a headache and a pain project than anything that's successful and enduring or sustainable in the long term of it all.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And I think that's going to require at minimum, some self-reflection on academics to make sure that we're actually worthwhile research partners, because police, listen, they're under no obligation to work with outsiders, right? They're under no obligation to cooperate on research projects, right? So I think some self-reflection about how we could be more valuable partners is in order.
A nice to have, but not a need to have. But with that, Eric, thank you for your time today. I've enjoyed hearing your perspective on all of this. Any last words?
No, that's a sweet little background you got back there. Lots of cool stuff on your shelf. So thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Cheers. I appreciate it. Everyone, until next time, take care.